Assalamu alaikum, everyone, and welcome to this Hijabi Life. I'm your host, Hakeemah. And as you know, on this Hijabi Life, we talk to Muslim women about their journey being visibly Muslim in the modern world. We talk to designers about fashion, and we talk to women about their hijab story. And of course, the guest we have today is no stranger to a good story. It's your favorite podcaster, your favorite storyteller, Mrs. Cadar Mahamud is here with us today from the Digital Sisterhood podcast. Assalamu alaikum, Cadar.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you so much for having me on. I'm extremely honored.
Of course, of course. As a Muslim woman, it's really, really important for us to have a space to share with each other about our stories, and especially about being visibly Muslim in the modern world. And on this show, we talk about fashion, and we talk to women not only about hijab as a fashion statement, of course, it is more so about their journey being visibly Muslim. And it's interesting going into this episode because as a podcast, we escape the visual and we go straight to the audio, right? And so I wanted to talk to you because one of the first times that I met you or found out about you was through the Qiyam for the village auntie, right? There was a lot of buzz about TDS and this amazing special guest that was going to be there. And again, I'm hearing this buzz, and I had never seen this person before. And then when you pop up on screen, everyone goes wild at the Qiyam. This is in Ramadan, and everyone's going, like there's a lot of chatter in the Zoom. I'm like, what is this TDS? Who is this other, right? And so your story kind of preceded you, or that buzz kind of preceded you. And so I want to talk to you not only about like your podcasting journey, but I want to talk to you about, what inspired you to start TDS? What is your birth story with the Digital Sisterhood podcast? What made you go into podcasting at the time that you did?
That's a really good question. I feel like every time that I answer this question, I say something new.
Well, good.
In many ways, I'm still putting the pieces together of all of the things that occurred. And I think the phenomenal about TDS is that it's always changing than what I originally thought. That's why I always say, like, this is not my project, this is Allah's project. And he's going to tell us exactly where this is going to go. And it's going to reach and what it's going to be. And I know that doesn't sound good as a company to talk like that, but that was the truth. That would imagine talking to people like, yeah, we're just finding out. It doesn't sound, I guess professional, but that was the truth. The exception of TDS from the beginning. And as you know, it started very, I guess, accidental in the sense that, I knew that I wanted, it started off at the beginning of COVID. Life stopped. Okay. Everyone stopped. We didn't go to the masjid. We're locked up. We're in our rooms. We're asking ourselves the critical conversation or the critical question of who are you? And are you happy with what you've done with your life thus far? Yeah. Or just, I guess, looking inward. And there's this really good quote that somebody tweeted once. It said, oh, people are going to find out if they like themselves this year.
Yeah.
And yeah. I never saw a more truer statement. And so in that time, just before COVID, my life was just go, go, go. I don't remember if I had too much time to reflect. It's just running after another, just chasing up, always feeling like slow. I was just not catching up fast enough. And so, unfortunately, even though COVID wasn't a good thing, and it was a very difficult thing for a lot of people, I think it also allows a lot of interception. And that in that time, I realized I wasn't happy, and I wasn't happy with what I was doing in my life. I just graduated university. And here I was with all these questions of how do I want to make my mark in the world? I know that sounds so corny, but those are the kind of questions I was asking.
Yeah.
And have I not? What am I going to do? And so obviously the thing that, isolation can bring is dreaming. So I dreamed a lot. I dreamed about what I could do when the world started again. And so one of those ideas was TDS. I was like, what if I started a platform that was like a third space? Yeah. It wasn't, if the messages weren't available, the Musalla wasn't available for women. We weren't allowed to gather. Does that mean that we have to stop gathering? Right. And that was the critical question, right? Is like, we're separated, but we don't have to be separated. Alhamdulillah for technology, there's opportunities for us to reconnect and still find that sense of community. And so I wanted to kind of create a third space for Muslim women. And then it turned out, as TDS started to kind of come to life, that TDS is a third space, and it still is even after the world had opened up, because I found out that a lot of Muslim women don't feel safe in spaces like their MSAs or masjids or the sisters program, for whatever reason, they don't feel or don't have them. And here is being able to fill a gap for those women. So the podcast started with wanting to tell stories. I've always saw TDS as a platform for women to authentically tell their own stories, to amplify their own voices, because they have voices. People say, "Oh, I'm giving voice to the voiceless." No, Muslim women have always had a voice. They always will have a voice, right? And so for me, it was about taking the voices that are there and platforming it and allowing them to show up in the world they want to show up. So I always say this project is a collective project. It's not one that has completely just my vision in it, but everyone's adding their vision. Every Muslim woman that I interact with or want to contribute or want to participate, they add their little spice and perspective and vision for what TDS is on a larger scale. And really started 2020, April 2020, first episode came out, 500, listeners. That was great. I'm like, where do they come from? And then 6 months, we got our first 1 million downloads. And then 3 months later, 4 million downloads, and it's been history ever since. And here we are, year 3?
Yeah.
Alhamdulillah.
You said how many million downloads?
Well, now officially like 10.6 million.
MashaAllah.
I'm happy. I mean, you have to say, like, I am quite surprised.
Yeah.
Right? So much of it. That's why we say, how did this happen?
Yeah.
I have a social following.
Right.
I didn't have a community. I wasn't someone that people knew, at least not globally. And then here I was just going from 0 to 100. How else can you describe it besides the barakah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala puts barakah in something. I'd like to believe that we, the founders and I, who were intentional from the start of the project, maybe had good, sincere action, or maybe one of us did, and Allah accepted from all of us.
Yeah.
Who knows? We don't know. But alhamdulillah for being able to be a part of something good. And, I will say my proudest moment of TDS thus far is 2 things. Is the fact that TDS was on a billboard.
Okay, yes. I saw that. I saw that.
That's kind of crazy to think that we're on a Spotify billboard in London, Ireland, Wales, Scotland. I'm just like, and you know what our logo is? It's 3 hijabi women.
3 hijabis, yeah.
Our student is in the middle.
Like
the Arabi on the right. So, and here it is just in this grand, the square center.
Yeah.
You can't make this up. Like, how did this happen? How did this happen? But Allah sometimes He wants something to get somewhere, and He wants it to succeed. It will. Who's gonna stop it?
Stop it.
And the second was obviously when the groundbreaking episode we did called Her Name Is Hannah did very well. We beat Joe Rogan in the charts and many other podcasters that have billion-dollar marketing teams and production and funding and all this good stuff. And here we are neck and neck with just simply a mic that looks like this and all the voices, the incredible stories and voices of Muslim women. And that was enough for us to be top charting.
MashaAllah, tabarakallah. When you talk about barakah, like it really does show. You can put in the minimal effort, but then also with the barakah of Allah, it is amplified because there's really nothing that can stop when something is blessed. So you can see it. You can see it just playing out right in front of you, mashallah. You talked about safe spaces, and we're going to talk about that a little bit later. But I think that one of the reasons why people resonate so much with TDS is because as Muslim women, there is a lack of safety, like you mentioned. There's a lack of safety with like expressing ourselves if we are not expressing perfection. Like if we are not the model Muslim and like the perfect circumstances in life have not played out for us. We have gone through struggles. We have gone through, we'll talk about like mental health issues and things like that have played out on some of your episodes. It feels as if you have to keep that to yourself. And when you created this safe space, I think that it was an outpouring of, and I'm glad you called it a sisterhood from the very beginning, because you can see that sisterhood growing. And although you probably didn't know, and you just, like you said, you simply got your mic and you opened it on spot, however you make a podcast, whatever you did. And the platform just created, it's because there was so much need for it. It solved a huge problem for us. And I also want to talk about the fact that it's an escape from the visual as well. As Muslim women, like I started off the show talking about how we were talking about, being visibly Muslim, and like the fact that your story preceded you. There was a lot of buzz, people listening. And it's like, you didn't even see what the host looks like first to judge anything. You just heard the stories. Yeah. You go straight to the meat of the issue. You talk about the stories first, and then you might be able to see, but do you even want to see? Like, you're just listening. You're binge listening over and over, story after story after story, and you're crying, and you're like happy, and you're like pulling for the person, and then you're devastated, and then you're like, it's like everything. You're on this roller coaster. And as Muslim women, oftentimes we don't get that privilege of people going straight to the heart of us. It's always like what we look like first. What color hijab is she wearing? How is she wearing it? Is she wearing the proper clothes with it? Is it not proper? Where is she at doing this? What behavior does she have doing this? Like, it's a lot of judgment first. What political views does she have from the way that she's wearing? Like, where does she live? It's all of that before you even know our name.
Yeah.
Before you even know anything about us. It's so much visual first. And I'm glad that the podcasting escaped you from that and you went straight to what's meaningful. So what does that mean to you? Like, just being able to have that podcast and be able to escape that visual. Is that something that was intentional, that you wanted it to be like that? Or was it something that was like, okay, well, I don't know what I'll do. I'll just do a podcast, and it worked out that way? Or was it like, I really don't want the visual aspect anymore. I just want people to like listen to our stories. What is that like for you?
First of all, I just want to say thank you for asking this question. No one's ever asked me that question.
Really?
Before. Yeah, wow. No one's ever asked me. And I'm just waiting for someone to ask me if this was like if I did it accidentally or not. When I started TDS, I wasn't a niqabi. And I didn't make it non-visual because I wanted to hide or anything like that. It was completely and utterly intentional. It's funny, when TDS started to get really successful, I got a lot of advices from podcasters. Why don't you make a video? Like, is it because you just didn't have the budget? And I said, I absolutely had the budget. I opted out of it every single time. And I have no plans to make it video. And so nobody asked me why. And just like walk away. Nobody else like, why are you doing this? Yeah. So when TDS started, or when the podcast was being conceptualized, I knew that Muslim women had barriers. We've always had barriers. And one of the biggest barriers we have is the way that others receive us based on how we look, or how our religious or how like our iman is based on what we look like. You know what I'm saying? And here's a podcast where we were talking about their relationship with Allah. And I've been around spaces, religious spaces, non-religious spaces. I've seen it kind of, and I've seen kind of the dynamic of what people decide who they want to listen to, who they don't. Yeah. And I always found that visuals can be divisive for Muslim women per se, in my experience. And I thought, what if I could remove that? Right? Because like, if you look at me, I'm a niqabi. My favorite color is black. And when you look off the bat, I've experienced people judging me, thinking I'm judgmental, right?
Here we go. Yes, love that.
If you only knew me and my story, you wouldn't think that way. And so for me, it's like, I just knew these things to be factual. I said, can I create a space where Muslim women can talk about Allah? They can talk about their beginning, middle, and end. They can talk about all these difficult moments without seeing them, and people just connecting to the person and their story. I knew it was possible because I do it, right? Yeah. I listen to people who aren't Muslim at all, right? And might have different values as I do, but I still learn from them. There's still things to be learned from people. And I know the value of that. And I just feel like if I could just show you how much you actually don't need to know what someone looks like. And the second part was, these women are not telling any kind of story. They're telling some of their most vulnerable stories. And here they are offering some of the darkest moments of their lives to the world. Now, do I want them to be worried about how they look on camera? Do I need them to worry about that, right? Because like, as women, we're conditioned to look a certain way, to feel a certain way, to, if you want to be heard, if you want to be, your work to be resonated, you need to look like this, this, and this. This is what the world has taught us. These are things that have been deeply entrenched and conditioned in us. If I want someone just to remove all of that and just tell the truth, I will do whatever I can to remove that barrier.
Yeah.
And so for me, it was like, if I remove the video and it's just you and me in a dark podcast room,
Yeah.
you might actually even forget the mic's there.
Yeah.
And it's just from one sister to another.
Yeah.
You know, and it turns out that feeling that I'm feeling in a podcast room is also being resonated with the sister in her home, in her room. Listening, they can feel that connection of just, it's from one sister to another.
Yeah.
And I'm glad it resonated. I don't know if it would, but I'm so glad it resonated, because that's the world I want to see. The world where somebody doesn't have to look at a non-hijabi and say, well, she doesn't know anything about law.
Yeah.
Or she has nothing to share that's valuable. Or she's just not, I just want to live in a world where everyone is respected and appreciated and seen for who they really are.
Yeah.
Everyone is on a journey to Allah. And that's it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we're all on that journey together.
Yeah, I respect that so much. I respect that so much. And from the time I started listening to your podcast, and then especially when I met you guys when we were in New Jersey, you had an event in New Jersey, that was a question that I always wanted to ask you, because from the first time I started to like understand like what your podcast was about, I found it to be so refreshing as a person who is always in front of a camera, as I am right now. There is a pressure to look a certain kind of way because someone is going to be looking at you.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And I think that it's a conundrum that hijabis in visible places, especially like shared online, et cetera, that we have to kind of weigh these things like, like what's the value that we're placing on how we present, and I think that when you strip that away, to me, I found that to be like so refreshing. And I could see it from the very beginning. I don't know why this is the first time anyone's asking you this question. To me, it's obvious. I thought it was going to be the 50th person asking.
Because I don't know. I think a lot of people think we're behind as well in terms of like how podcast industry is moving.
Yeah.
But like, I'm not doing this work to speak to non-Muslims per se.
Mm-hmm.
They're the benefit. If I get to talk, that's cool,
Yeah.
But my goal is to talk to Muslims,
Yeah.
And to get us all on the same page and to revive that sisterhood that I feel like has a bit of cracks or a bit of loss here and there, and to create that global sisterhood. And I feel like, man, I just know it's a barrier. I mean, I did a study in university. My thesis was on the niqab ban and the rise of secularism, and this obsession of women's bodies.
Mm-hmm.
There's such a long history for it. And of course it's done something to us.
Yeah.
Of course it has. Of course it's stopped us from entering certain rooms, taking certain jobs, speaking a certain way. Of course it has. It has done to me. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Part of the reason why I wear niqab, this is my only second year in. And so I never ever thought about I'd ever become a niqab in my entire life. Did I ever think? And imagine like entering into a new world and then people just often archetyping you already. I'm shocked.
Yeah.
I was like, no, like, I'm quite, I'm not timid.
Yeah.
Not by any means. I'm actually quite loud. I have to like take it back a bit. You know what I'm saying? Because, there's an archetype by women who dress like this.
Yes.
And so I'm like often like, oh my God, my favorite is when people do find out who I am, they are floored. They're like, you're a copy? Floored, like, and it's like
so much personality, and you're in a cover. You know what I'm saying?
It's challenging something that people aren't saying. You get it. Like, it's challenging things that people are. I guess the nuances that people don't want to talk about. It's like, but you're my favorite person, but you're in a hobby. I'm like, let's talk about it.
It can work out that way, surprisingly.
So it's like if you can feel, I maybe connected to someone who might look like this, and you're maybe not a hijabi. And you feel like I speak to you, then perhaps, maybe you can change how you interact or your experiences that you think validated you, right? Or people that made you feel small.
Yeah.
And let me be the latter.
Yeah.
That's not all of us.
Mashallah.
That's not everybody. That's not Islam. That's not the one I'm practicing. You know what I'm saying? And so for me, it's like, and I just want to dispel this whole, a pious person looks like this, a rich person looks like this. A person with Hakeemah looks like this. Like, listen, if you knew the amount of people who look like this, who are completely maybe not that, subhanAllah, you would change your whole mindset about what we deem somebody to be righteous or not, or pious or not, or not.
Yeah.
Those things are just No, they're not indicators, unfortunately. But that's what, the world or society has been kind of spewing. It's like what we look like, and it's just all a lie.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, you spoke so much truth, like bar after bar.
Yeah. Can I tell you though? Can I tell you? But this has also been good for my ego. Let me tell you why. Wallahi, because I like putting that to the side. Doing this work is a great fitna for the ego, for the soul. Like fame is not good, right? Tell me how TDS liberates me. No one has really a strong. People know ish what I look like, but they can't differentiate me unless I speak.
Yeah.
So imagine I'm in Costco. I'm just with my mom. With my mom, chilling. And you hear girls talking about TDS behind me. We have no idea.
Yeah.
I'm in front of them. And I just listened. Thank God they weren't saying anything bad because I wanted to get personal. I'm like, oh no, it would have been positive, good feedback anyway, truthful feedback. But they were saying things, about TDS, but they had no idea. And then I remember I had a TDS event, for example, in Ohio. So I came in and I just came in with the crowd. Yeah. Right. I prayed Salah with everybody, and then they had a host saying, "Okay, we're gonna welcome." I just immersed from the middle of the crowd. Yeah. Right. And I remember the girls were like, like genuine. You were sitting beside me. Yeah. And I just love it because it's just I can live the private life that I want to. I don't have to feel forced to act a certain way or a different way. I could just be with the Muslims. It kind of feels like being Clark Kent. You know what I mean? Like, is this what Clark was feeling? Just take off the glasses and you just
He suddenly
and then put it back on when you need to. I just appreciate that so much. But I also reckon, like, it's like, when you're an audio podcast, it's a different kind of connection. Yeah. Like, I wish somebody could talk about the science of that because they're not seeing you, but I'm in your ear. Yeah. Which sometimes other people have described it as I feel like you're the narrator of my life. Yeah. You're just so intimately inside my head. She's like, I've memorized even the way that you breathe. Because it's just that's all they have to focus on. Yeah. Imagine one time I'm just sitting there. Someone just could tell just by the way I was breathing. And I whispered, they're like, oh, that's other. Like, they just, it was insane. I said, that is so insane. It's so insane. But that's the phenomenon. People can be great listeners is what I learned. Yeah. Yeah. So true. Mashallah. Okay. So we have to take a break and come back. But right when we come back, we're going to be talking to Adar about her hijab story, because you did mention that you just started wearing niqab. This is your second year. So we're going to come back and we're going to talk to Adar about her decision to wear niqab and what her hijab story has looked like so far. Welcome back to This Hijabi Life. We are talking today with Cadar Mahamud, the host of the Digital Sisterhood podcast. And we were just talking about your journey with niqab and kind of the privileges you enjoy about wearing niqab and being kind of anonymous in the crowd. And also being a podcaster where there's no visual and there's just audio and kind of piercing into people's souls with the stories that you tell. So I do want to talk a little bit more about your hijab journey. You just started wearing niqab this is your second year. And after I saw you in New Jersey, was it last year? I think it was last year. You were talking about, the fact that, there's these moments when you walk into rooms where people have not seen you before, especially when you have, like meetings and stuff with your podcast. And people haven't seen you before, and then when you show up, they're like, "Wait, what? Like, this is the host?" So, what has your hijab journey looked like so far? What led you to actually wearing niqab, and what about some of those moments when you do walk into boardrooms where it's non-Muslims or no one looks like you in the room, and there's a shock factor, which it shouldn't be there, but it is, right? Tell us a little bit more about your journey towards wearing hijab the way that you wear it, and then some of those moments when you're the most impactful person in the room and you're the one who looks so distinct from anyone else. Yeah. I mean, subhanAllah. I mean, I couldn't have written it the way that Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala written it for me. Didn't think I would, even inspire women to think about wearing a niqab. I can't tell you how many listeners I've met who said, I wear niqab because I saw you, like I love how you did it, like how
Mhm.
you are. Even my favorite is women who do wear niqab, but they never wear their glasses. They didn't think it
Okay.
looked nice, and they're like, "But you made it look so cool."
Yeah. Okay.
I was like, "Since I'm visually impaired, I have to."
Right. It's
So
like
there's
you
no
gotta
like,
see.
there's no option for me. But I mean, I'm glad that people can feel comfortable to do it.
Yeah.
Now that I guess someone they see, and like does it. I mean, I'm
Mhm.
really happy. That makes me so happy.
Yeah.
Um, I started to wear hijab when I was 20 years old.
Mhm.
I like to say I became gone cautious of Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala when I was 20. Before that, I never wore hijab. And my parents weren't the type of people to pressure me at all either, because my mother had her own hijab journey also as
Mhm.
well in that. And so mom always says, though, she always says, I wish I had like encouraged it in you when you were in kindergarten. You wouldn't have struggled so much in middle school and in high school. And I'm like, yeah, you're right. I probably wouldn't have, Like
Yeah.
not the way that my sister, mashallah, she wears it confidently because she's, been trying it on since she was a kid. But I struggled a great deal about
Mhm.
how others would perceive me. And I went to a predominantly Caucasian school. And so there weren't any Muslims in my school. Maybe there were like three of us.
Mm.
The three that were there were black.
Mhm.
And two of them were boys.
Okay.
And so it was just me sometimes.
Yeah.
And so just the idea of exploring hijab just frightened me so much. It'd give me anxiety attacks all the time. And so I just tried to, you know, avoid thinking about it. And it wasn't until I graduated high school and I got into a top university and my mom's like, we're gonna go travel, get you on a plane for the first time. You deserve it. Went on the plane, spent
Yeah.
in London a month there. My aunt, I mean, all her daughters were hijab except me, but they didn't say anything. And then I was supposed to go to Italy after. My mother was like, oh, Ramadan's coming in. We're going to Islam. We're going to go to Abu Dhabi. And it's funny because it's like,
Right.
this is Abu Dhabi, but at the time, 2019, Abu Dhabi was still very much deserty.
Yeah, okay.
And my mom was like, we're going to go there. You need to start seeing Muslims around. You need to see
Yeah.
how hijab can feel and look. And I remember I was so mad. I was so
Mm.
mad. I was so angry. But you gotta do what mom says. So I went, um, and it really blew me out of the water. I
Mm.
had never, it was a culture shock. It really was. I know it sounds
Yeah.
weird, but it was a culture shock for
Yeah.
me, not to say that because there's so many Muslims here in Canada, but it just wasn't my reality. And so going to a Muslim country in that way, seeing Muslim women wear their hijab so proudly and so confidently wasn't something I saw before. And I
Mhm.
was like, wow, there's a different way to live. This is
Yeah.
just
Right.
different life. Like it just
Yeah.
it just
Mm.
surprised me. And that actually started to make me start thinking more deeply about hijab. And I remember my mom would say, like I'd be sitting in the living room. She's like, what are you thinking about? I find you just thinking.
Yeah.
Everywhere you're just thinking. I'm like, how do
Yeah.
you know I'm thinking? She goes, you have a look on your face all the time. And I
Yeah.
would say, no, I'm not. But I really was thinking. I was thinking, I
Mhm.
was like, why don't like I practice my religion in that way? Like why don't I be visibly Muslim? This
Mhm.
was really stopping me. And I just kept thinking. And I've told the story before on my podcast, but my aunt had a housekeeper who was from Ethiopia. She was 19 years old, very devoted to her faith.
Yeah.
Only young person in that apartment, me and her. And so
Mhm.
I tried to hang out with her as often as I can, even though she's like, I gotta work. I was like, I'll help you. She's like, no, you cannot. But I tried to spend time with her, and she took me to a masjid once for Ramadan, and I had it was a really interesting experience because I got to a masjid that had more migrant workers, the mosque that they went to. So I saw a lot of people who just were working really hard. And I remember there was an eye that came up. I don't know what the eye was, but I remember there was this old man crying so profusely that it scared me. Like I was like, why is he crying? What is he that's hearing? What is he? Does he know that I don't know that hasn't been crying like this? And
Mm.
so after that, I just went back home thinking again. And um, my aunt's housekeeper came up to me. Her name's Amina. We also had her Jannah. I mean, she
Mhm.
looks at me. She goes, "Hey, I see that you might be like thinking about something. I'm not sure what you're thinking about, but what I would encourage you to do is to pray 2 rakats. Ask Allah SWT for guidance. Ask Allah
Mhm.
SWT to guide you, and He will guide you." I'm thinking like, what do you mean? What do I do? She's like, just pray 2 rakats. Just pray 2 rakats in the middle of the night. I'll wake you up, pray, and just ask Allah to help. And she didn't really give me any other more pointers than that. And I just remember just taking her advice. And then I came back to Toronto, Canada a month later, started university. 2 months later, I started to meet other women that wore hijab. They became my friends. They loved their hijab, inspired me to think about mine. Then one day I woke up, was like, you know what? I'm gonna wear hijab. And I remember the first day I wore it, I didn't tell my parents. They didn't know all these things were going on. The first day I wore it, I went downstairs and my dad looked at me and he actually shed a tear. And I've never seen my dad in my life. I was like, Dad, like I was just genuinely shocked. And he was like, I didn't know you would ever arrive here. You know? So it's just like, for him it mattered. I think it's something that also worried him as a parent. Is my spiritual relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because there's only so much you can do with an adult 20-year-old, right?
Yeah.
And invite them to. So
yeah.
My parents think, I always say it's a miracle that you went from 0 to 100 in the way that you did. But I was so obsessed with hijab. Like to me, I felt liberated because I struggled a great deal in high school because everything was about how you looked. Everything was about the way that you looked, and it really stunted me in high school. So when I'm here putting on an abaya and a hijab, and people like talking about your heart, your character is what matters, it just blew me out of the water. I was like, this is for me. I found a place I feel fully accepted. Because I can be a good person. I can't be the most beautiful person in the world. But what I can be is a good person. What I can be is an honest person. What I can be is a good neighbor. I can be those things. Well, I can't be perfect exteriorly or all these things. And it freed shackles I didn't even know I saw that were on me.
Yeah.
And so that was my how I started my hijab. And my niqab was right after 3 weeks after TDS. I interviewed an author named Lena Ahmed, where she talked about Beauty fi Sabilillah, her book. She's an author from Ottawa who published a book in 2017 after the death of her close friend. And the book was about beauty fi Sabilillah. What is beauty?
Yeah.
Like, what does it mean to be beautiful? And when I read her book, I said, I want to attain that kind of beauty. The kind that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves. And and that's when I decided to wear niqab. Really in the middle of the season 1.
Yeah. MashaAllah. Okay. So what I'm hearing now is like, hijab is supposed to be for everyone. I mean, I think that it's supposed to be an escape from beauty standards, right? It's supposed to allow you the space to be however you look in private. And then when you're public, nobody who doesn't know you, who's a stranger, who's man or woman, is supposed to be able to judge you from the way that you look. I feel like that's one of the things that hijab is supposed to achieve for you, to free you from these beauty standards that are set up by different societies. It might be that you look one way if you're African, or you look one way if you're in Europe, or like it depends on the time that you were born and what age you were born. Like, is it this thing or is it that thing? Hijab is supposed to free you from that. Wherever you were born, whenever you were born, the way you look is private to you, right? But especially, and it's so important that we're arriving at this point on a show about where sometimes we too talk about fashion, we talk about collections, we talk about people who design hijabs and things like that. Sometimes hijab is conflated with the perception of it being a fashion statement, right? And because we talk about style and we talk about fashion, and I love that, right? It takes away all of that meaning it's supposed to have, right? And it actually sets a new beauty standard, right? Perpetuated by designers, by influencers, by stylists, by people who post online, that the way you wear it is supposed to look like this for it to be acceptable now. So now you can't wear your hijab freely. You can't wear it, the way that you want to. That's comfortable for you. It has to be that it's this color and this fabric and this designer and it's like, well, dang, wasn't this supposed to help me out, right? It's supposed to have that freeing feeling that you felt where you're like, this thing is not going to make me acceptable or not acceptable. The way that I look is not going to do that for me anymore. I'm taking that away from you guys. I hold that power now, right? But now it's like we have a new standard of like what's beautiful and what's not beautiful when you're hijabi, when you're niqabi, when you wear abaya. And it's like, when can we just escape from that and just do what makes us feel beautiful, no matter what that looks like, right? What makes us feel not just beautiful on the outside, but beautiful on the inside. You talked about character. Sorry, I gulped. you could be a good neighbor. You could be a kind person. You can be generous. That's beautiful too. Like, what happened to all of that? So yeah, I'm really happy that we were able to talk, about that point, because I think it's really important that when you're talking about these things, you talk about the other side too, because we're not just, redefining hijab as a new beauty standard, because then it's ruining the point. It's really ruining the point and the experience that hijabis have, especially in the modern age. So go ahead.
No, you hit the nail on the head.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So I also want to talk about like those moments that you mentioned at that one event that I was at, where people have heard your podcast, they've seen how much you resonate, how many downloads, and people don't even have to download to listen to your podcast. They can just stream it, but they're making the effort to actually download it so they have the file in their phone, right? Like they want to grasp that and hold it themselves. And so you walk into these meetings and this is the first time someone's seeing that visual, right? Talk to us a little bit about like, what is that like? Like, what have people expressed in that moment? Are there any stories about, those moments when you walk into those meetings and like, boom, it's Adar, she's in the house.
It depends. Is it meetings with non-Muslims who are trying to interact on a business? So it's, sometimes I think sometimes I've always had the feeling that sometimes they're looking for someone like me to kind of say, I'm the outlaw, Let me tell you, sometimes I think they're looking for a little bit of an outlaw, and difference, right? Because we're in the age of diversity and exploring, but not too much diversity either. But here I am, just kind of like, nah, this is all the way. Perhaps you,
right?
Whole thing now. I always like to be a little funny, a little charming. I like to break the ice a little bit.
Yeah.
Because I'm maybe in that room, I might be the first Niqabi they've ever met. So I really try to I'm very conscious about, giving a good reputation, being, I guess, like them, and which I am, and I remember when we went to the UK, we got invited to Spotify headquarters. And that was such an experience because I was like, what are we doing here? Like, it was a little bit like impossible. I was like, how did this happen?
Yeah.
And walking in there and thinking, oh my God, has anybody ever who looked like me entered in this room, in this building before?
Yeah.
I just kept thinking about it. And I remember just looking around thinking if anyone thought it was strange, but people just kind of seemed like, oh, it wasn't really a thing. But for me, it's such a thing because I just never imagined it before. And sitting in the meeting, with our, our rep, our correspondents, shout out to Evie. She's really incredible and phenomenal. She's been following us for a while. And that's how we, got to connect with her. It's just been such an interesting experience. I think what's been different, I'll tell you, that I think I've learned a great deal is sitting in meetings with people on a business level. And then having to communicate your ethics. It's one thing it's one thing to see, it's another thing to mix.
Yeah.
And try to work together. You know what I mean? Like that's a different experience because there's a lot of work that we had to do to educate. Right? SubhanAllah, the default for a lot of people who might not know much about Islam is like everything's haram for them. And so they operate from that default. Oh, you guys can't do anything.
Can't do.
Right? And I remember there was this funny situation that happened where we were talking to advertisers. And we said, we can't do alcohol because, it's not really our thing. Work, definitely not, Music, the sound of our breath is enough,
Right.
That's a tune,
Yeah.
And then their natural conclusion was, you guys definitely don't snowboard. Like abs.
That.
She's like, all right, let's go. We have abs, but we do like snowboarding and stuff. We looked at her like this. We said, what made you think we don't snowboard?
Right.
I said,
You've been missing the hobby sliding down.
I said, I was on a hockey team.
Right.
I don't know about these girls, but I was on a hockey team. I don't know what you're talking about. I was just, and I just remember just explaining to her, I'm like, why would you think that? And I remember one of our founders, Nora, she was like, well, baby, don't get it twisted. We can do all of that. Right. You know, like all of it. She was explaining everything, all of this. And
right.
You know, and they're just floored and shocked. And I can see their eyes like kind of like, wow, I just didn't know. And I'm like, for me, it was like my natural instinct was like, that's common sense. Like it's snowboarding. You know, like
right. It's like, just we don't genuine halal fun. Yeah.
But you actually think we're locked up in a basement? You know, so but you know, we tried to kind of just be really, really nice and understand that it's okay to interact on an educational basis. And right now, the era that we are educating.
Yeah.
And I always say, like, this is probably the most sincerest work we'll ever do, because women after us will have to explain that they can snowboard too. Yeah. Like, you know? And I know that that one sister gets that snowboarding advertising, she's like, I don't wonder why it was so easy for me, sis. Let me tell you. You know what I'm saying? So it's great work, and it's an interesting experience because it feels like we're just the first everywhere. I don't know why it feels like everything we do feels like the first.
Yeah.
You know? And I'm just in spaces where I feel like I'm the first, and I'm like, how do you navigate this?
Yeah.
Who's done this before? Can we get some research?
Yeah.
Sometimes there isn't research, and sometimes you just have to wing it. Sometimes you just have to be unapologetic. Sometimes you got to be blunt.
Yeah.
And say no. And as uncomfortable as that no sound echoing through the room.
Yeah.
You have to stand still.
Yeah.
You know, and still and strong. And exiting that room and knowing that Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala provides, not them.
Ooh, that part. Well, Adar, again, bar after bar, you just keep dropping it, girl. We do have to go on a break, but we'll be back with Adar to tell us a little bit more about her journey with hijab and niqab and podcasting with the Digital Sisterhood podcast. We'll be back after the break. Welcome back to this Hijabi Life. Today we're talking to Cadar Mahamud, the host of the Digital Sisterhood podcast. And a few answers ago, you mentioned, you were talking about the fact that people might judge you because they think you're judging them because you're niqabi, right? And subhanAllah, like I said, we're going to have to come back to that because that's one of the questions I want to ask you about. Because when I met you guys, I keep going back to this event in New Jersey. It was one of the best things I've ever attended. That's number one. like I'm talking about ever attended. Like it was one of the most meaningful events. And there was a moment there where you were talking about, like being able to have a personality while wearing niqab. I've always had this like bipolar experience with niqab. I used to wear niqab periodically, like sometimes I would wear niqab if I felt it was appropriate. And then I did love the feeling of wearing niqab. I felt like it privatized me even further. It did all the beautiful things, but also, and maybe it was me, maybe it was the people around me. I mean, I was young, teenager, so you're like impressionable. You're trying to figure out, why do I wear this? Why wouldn't I want to wear this? Like, you're just trying to figure out who you are. And it felt as if when I would put it on, I would feel good, but then I also became a part of the elite. Like putting it on made me group myself with these sisters over here who they study more, they're more pious, they wouldn't break any rules, they don't sin as much, blah, 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 blah. And then like, if I wasn't wearing it, it felt as if like, man, like I'm part of the other crowd who who can only aspire to be with those sisters. And it wasn't just like, mashallah, like they're on their deen. It just more so was like you can't sit with us kind of vibe. You know, if you're not like wearing the flowiest khimar and the longest, you know, layered about like niqab and like everything, and then if it's not all black, then like what are you doing? Like what are you doing? So I stopped wearing it even periodically, because it felt as if I'm going to do this thing, I don't want to have even a shred of like looking down at anyone else who doesn't wear it. Right. And when I was there at that event, it felt as if, because you guys have the Digital Sisterhood podcast, which again, like it creates so much sisterhood and camaraderie. And it's not about here or there. It's like everyone's on the same level. Everyone's like crying at the episodes and like the mental health issues and like all of the things that you guys share about. And all of you, like there was like 5 of you went up to the front, and everyone's wearing black and everyone's wearing niqab. And like, I was just like, wow, these are the sisters that are creating so much camaraderie, so much sisterhood. They are so funny. They're so fun. They're so, you know, and it helped me to dissipate those perceptions I had in my head before, when I would put it on and I would feel like, well, I'm over here with these sisters, like I'm on a high horse, like over here. And it felt as if y'all don't do that. Like, and not only that, but there was a movement, I felt, there was like a trend online in a fashion sense where people were being more like forward with their wearing of niqabs and wearing like even looser, like the loosest, the longest, like the most modest. And I was just like, wow, I really resonate with that. I want to do that, you know? But it was refreshing. And you were talking about the fact that you feel like you're the like no one has done this before. Like you're the new person in the room. I feel like, yes, you are a pioneer in certain ways, but you're also a refresher, you know, like there has to be a new perspective put on people so that they shed old perceptions and they're coming into the new. So all of that to say, how do you maintain that humility, that humbleness, that kind of way of being right here on the same level as everybody else, while also having that perception put on you? Because I'm not saying that you look down on anyone. Someone might be looking at you and being like, well, because I don't wear a niqab, she's not gonna want to talk to me. She's not gonna want to sit with me. How do you balance that? Like, how are you able to be humble and have this be like the way that you present in the world? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a really good question, because, you know, it's something I experienced, you know, feeling like I couldn't sit or hang out with certain group of people. That was me on the outside.
Yeah.
And so I used to think, well, one day if I wear niqab, I'm never going to be those people. You know, like I was like, I would never, you know, talk like this or act like this or say this, you know? And also like some of the archetypes about women who dress like this were so limiting. For example, one of them is they're introverted.
Yes.
Why does every niqabi have to be introverted?
Yeah. You're the most extroverted person.
Like, every single one of them. Like I just don't understand. I'm like, but that, like, when did a niqab or have a personality? Like it boggled my mind, only because it just wasn't consistent to what we learned about the companions, the women. They all had plethora of personality. You know what I'm saying? They all had all types of temperament. It just wasn't reality of what we know and what we've learned. And so I just wanted to represent that. And also, like, to be honest, the thing that keeps me up the most is the perception of what people think because I wear this.
Yeah.
Right? It was actually the thing that actually made me afraid to wear it. Was people thinking that I was something I was not.
Yeah.
And a fear of playing it up and stuff like that. So, you know, for me, the reality is I might not be like nothing like everybody else. I might actually be lower, you know? And here I am with you know, this filter. And it can be a very dangerous walk, and a very dangerous thing to be. And I just, honestly, the best advice I ever gotten was from my teacher, my Quran teacher, when I started TDS, because and I started to wear niqab and stuff. And she's like, listen to me. If we're going to do this work, you can't be like everybody else. I said, what do you mean? And she's like, you can't be anybody else. You have to do things differently. I said, what does that mean? She says, you need to pray at the last third of the night on a regular. You have to be a person that gives sadaqah often. You have to be a person that repents often. You have to be a person who is extremely self-aware.
Yes.
Or else you're going to find yourself in big trouble. Matter of fact, the thing that you think might be good for you actually might harm you. And so she said, but you decide. And I just remember thinking like, oh no, like, you know, for me, it was like she was ringing the alarm. And it really was, it was really the wake call I needed to hear. Because I did develop a lot of anxiety, actually. You know, I don't go out as much, believe it or not, I don't go out as much because of that over consciousness of it. But all I can really be is myself. The truth is, some people find me very strange. Okay, there's a lot of people who think I'm just the
right, and there's nothing wrong with that.
But right? I'm not even at their table, and I look like them. You know what I'm saying? So like, they just find me so strange, and I'm also learning a lot more about what's happening within Muslim women, right? And so I'm okay to be different. If I have to be uncomfortably different for other people to kind of stretch this spectrum or this like landscape of Muslim women, then so be it. You know, at the end of the day, I'm just a Muslim trying her best. Yeah. And I am such a sinner, and I ask Allah to forgive me, for He knows who I actually really am. You know, and I take all those feelings into my work by bringing some of the most, you know, different voices that maybe people weren't comfortable platforming, but I was doing it, you know, because I'm trying to just remain, you know, like be in the center and real, you know, and I think, you know, what helps also, ironically, it's like weird. I think what helps also is my personality. Yeah, you know, they say that helps. I forget you're wearing a cup. Like, you know, like, somebody said that to me because I don't even see that anymore. Yeah, and I'm like, okay, then great. You know, I guess being who I am has done a great good. You know, and then there's some people who are never going to give me a chance, and I know that, and I have to be okay with that. They're just gonna look at me like, absolutely not. Yeah, you know, and that's okay. I just hope that inshallah, you know, they'll change their mind about it. You know, I think I'm pretty dope. I think I'm all right. I think I'm all right, you know? Yeah, no, you're pretty dope. No, you really are. No, you're such a change maker. You're such a change maker. And I hope people realize like the privilege that they have to be living at the same time as you. Absolutely not. Yes. I guarantee you. I'm leaving that on the table. Take it, Ada. No, I'm not taking it. I'm so sorry. Absolutely not. Man, may Allah SWT make me better than what you think I am. I mean, because there's always room for improvement. But honestly, absolutely. On my case, absolutely. Ask my mom. My mom, she's my. You know, there's people that sing your praises. I had to have a sit down with my mother because all she kept singing was my negatives. And everyone kept saying, you know, your mom was like saying how like you're this. I'm like, she's talking crap about me, right? You know? And my mom was like, I think that you're like, what's different about you? Like, I feel like you're right. You know, Ma, you know, like you keep me humble. You know what I'm saying? Right, yeah. So it's the reality. You know, it's like go talk to everybody's mom. We're gonna humble everybody very quick. You know what I mean? Your mom will always tell you the truth. Your mom will say, and she'll tell people the truth. You are. Yeah, and she'll tell everybody the truth. Even though I did not consent to it. You know what I'm saying? Oh my God. Like I'm the same person. The most I've laughed in the whole episode. Like, I'm just cracking up the whole time. You know, I'm the same person that'll join on this interview, and then I'll see that my bed's not made. I'm just like throwing everything, clothes that's flying, and then getting on a call. And it just looks great here. If you saw right. Just in this frame. As so popular said on social media, I'm just a girl. Yeah. I'm just a girl. You know? But alhamdulillah. Okay, Adar. So it's gonna get a little bit serious now because we were talking about there was at some point we mentioned mental health, right? And I always wanted to know, like there's an ongoing theme with a lot of your episodes where a sister, a family, a child is telling their story from when they were a child. And this theme of mental health issues comes up, right? Sometimes you have to put trigger warnings at the beginning of your episodes because you're going to be talking about suicidal thoughts or suicide itself. You're going to be talking about assault. You're going to be talking about, things that deserve a trigger warning. Mm-hmm. I always wanted to know,
the theme that a lot of your episodes have, where someone is dealing with things like schizophrenia, like all of these issues, and you're talking to Muslim women. Are these things that emerged, right? Like as you're talking, you're just like realizing story after story after story, people are dealing with mental health issues? Or was it that you're seeking stories that have this layer on top of it? Because I feel like there's a difference if it's an emerging trend where someone who is wanting to share their story is also talking about mental health. I feel like that it unveils the fact that there's a lot of mental health issues with Muslim women in our community, or with immigrant families. You're talking to a lot of people who their parents came here to, so they're first generation. So like, are there a lot of Muslim families that are dealing with mental health issues under the rug? So was that an emerging theme, or did you seek out stories that have these themes in it already?
No, it was an emerging theme. It was something that was always mentioned in every story. I don't know if I ever heard a story that didn't mention it.
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever heard a story or submission that didn't mention mental health whatsoever. And you have to remember, mental health is extremely stigmatized, and even more stigmatized within the Muslim community, right?
Yeah.
And so there isn't too many outlets where we get to talk about us overcoming the difficulties and trials that we face that are from wounds and pain that are not visible, right? That are not visible. Yeah. So for us, it's really, really important to be able to find space to be able to do. And it was interesting because I thought they would be a bit scared to share that.
Yeah.
But when one did, the next one came.
Floodgates got open.
It was the craziest floodgate I've ever seen. It's like giving people, the women, one story gave the permission for another.
Yeah.
And it just became easy. And it just hasn't stopped.
Yeah.
Yes, we do a couple of occasions deal with difficulty because everybody has their fight in it, but it's just women are ready to say something about it. And now I think the thing that surprises me most is the DM messages in reaction to the stories that we get. Like, I used to get so many of these episodes, I would get as young as 11 years old. How did I even have Instagram? Right. 11 years old.
Yeah.
Saying, this story really resonated with me. I'm 11 years old. I live in this country.
Wow.
And I'm like, just pulled by it. And I remember, like, when we were talking about our target audience, some of our advertisers didn't believe us that we had as young as 11 years old. And I don't know, like, I mean, are we looking for them? Absolutely not. You know what I'm saying? Do we invite them to speak? No. But they're searching for content like this to explain some of the things they're even experiencing.
Yeah.
SubhanAllah, it makes me so sad, that they're essentially coming to us sometimes, a lot of times, for help. And you just get a different view of the ummah.
Yeah.
Wallahi, you get a different view and you're like, I wish I started this sooner.
Yeah.
It's just this guilt of, I wish I started this. Why didn't we start this sooner?
Yeah. Left for when you started it, because it is such a safe space for people to be able to express that. And just by telling their story, it's a healing for them. Even if, on top of therapy and on top of medication or like whatever else needs to be done, and healing through just time and grieving and process. There's a lot of really heavy stories being shared on your podcast, but like just having that space to even talk about it, because imagine so many people haven't even talked about it. They don't have anyone to talk to, so it might even be better for them to talk to millions of people almost anonymously, through just speaking, and then it just gets shared. And then just feel like that resonation is there, especially on a podcast called, with the word sisterhood in there. Like some people don't have community. So this is where they found community. So Jazakallah khair for creating that safe space. And I know you don't want to take...
I don't take that big.
Stop.
I give it to all. I swear, I can't say that I'm the architect entirely about this. It's just it's the guidance of Allah SWT that gives us the tawfiq to do something like this, and it really is Allah's doing. I'm just glad He allowed me to participate.
He's using you
in His will. Yes, that is what I'm most proud about.
Alhamdulillah. Okay, we do have to take our final break, and when we come back, we are going to be wrapping up with one of my favorite guests so far. Adar. I've laughed the most I've ever laughed on any episode. So we'll be back to wrap up the show with Adar. Welcome back to this Hijabi Life. We are wrapping up a phenomenal show with Cadar Mahamud, the amazing host of the Digital Sisterhood podcast. And if you haven't paused the episode by now, to go and Google it and then add it to your Spotify list, or like however you want to listen to it, and then start listening. Do it now because it will literally change your life. Like it really will. I remember I started to listen to the Digital Sisterhood podcast at a time when I was trying to weed out listening to other things. And this was the most halal thing for me to be listening to. So I started to literally erase the listening to other things to listening to this. And alhamdulillah, it has been that bridge towards just listening to podcasts and things that don't have anything wrong in it. Okay. So I want to thank you for being here with us and for sharing your story. And if you could give a final word of advice to anyone out there who might be, just thinking about how I called you a change maker in this episode, like how they can use their voice or their talent or their community to make a change, like everybody has that within them. What would be your advice on how to, harness the strength inside of you or that talent within you to make a change, especially in the Muslim community?
It's a great question. I feel like, and maybe this is an unpopular opinion, I don't think that everything that everybody builds is good. So my advice is to build something that's good. And that's based for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because you want to build something in this life that not only benefits you, dunya wise, but akhirah wise. I mean, that's the best way to spend time, but also to be a participant in this ummah and seeing the cracks and the holes and the pains and being a part of the solution, and help, because I'm a big believer that everybody has a gift. I believe Allah SWT has given everybody a gift. And the question always remains is that how are you using that gift? And how are you enacting it and accessing it? We have it in us to make changes, to do something about it. When I started TDS, it seemed like an impossible dream, seemed a bit crazy, seemed maybe, some people would have said that's just not possible. Yeah. But that's not my experience today. And I just hope with everything that I've shared and everything that I've done thus far, that's what you're taking away, that good can be done unapologetically Muslim.
Mashallah.
Doors can be opened being unapologetic and morally driven. Doors will not close. And there isn't a limitation. And Allah SWT can provide you anything and everything if you believe it to be. So don't limit Allah SWT. Consult with Him in everything and anything that you're trying to do, and say Bismillah. You have to act. Don't delay. I don't like delay. Don't delay. Inshallah.
Thank you so much, Cadar, for being here and giving us that beautiful final word. I hope that anyone who listens to it takes it to heart and truly does consult with Allah and realize that their identity as a Muslim, especially a Muslim female who's wearing hijab, niqab, whatever it is that lets everyone know that you are a Muslim before they even get to know anything about you. I hope you have the strength to do that unapologetically. And as for me, my final word, I hear that so many good things came out of the pandemic. The Digital Sisterhood podcast came from, Cadar sitting in her bedroom with a notebook and just writing down like what would be her intentions, like, just really trying to figure out how to harness her voice and make some good. And that came out of a situation that might have been, and was devastating. It was a global pandemic, right? But so many good things did come out of people just sitting with themselves and trying to figure out how they can still make a change in a world that seems to be crumbling down. So with my final word, I also want to reiterate that, not only can you make a change the way that others said with your Muslim identity and being unapologetic, but also even in times like right now, as we record this episode, there's tragedy happening all over the world, especially in Palestine. And there are people who are sitting with themselves a lot more in these moments. And whatever you do, make sure that you consult with Allah about, how you're going to make that change in the world. But really beautiful things can come out of these times when everything seems to be crumbling. And everything seems to be dark, lightness can be found. So I pray that Allah guides us in our endeavors and allows you, the viewers, to harness your talents and your voice and make a good change in the Muslim community the way that Adar has as well. So tune in next week for another amazing episode of this Hijabi Life, where we talk to Muslim women about their hijab journey and being visibly Muslim in the modern world. And until then, stay blessed and covered beautifully.